Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Technology Considerations for the Solo and Small Firm Attorney. For those of you who may not be aware, this is part of a training series that we developed in partnership with our speaker here today and the Public Interest Law section of the Florida Bar called Leaving a Legal Legacy. And today we're going to talk about just that. So the technology considerations that you might have as a solo practitioner, as a small firm attorney, or somebody who is thinking about going in those directions. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alexis Alvarez Bartholomew, and I am so happy to welcome you here today. I'm the Director of Statewide Training at Florida Legal Services, and always happy to be in community and learn with you all. First things first, I do want to go over some brief housekeeping announcements. This is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent to all of you who are here and all of you who are registered. So don't worry if you missed something or have to hop off, you will still receive a copy of that recording. Second piece of housekeeping announcements are CLE credit. This is approved by the Florida Bar for CLE credit, not just your general CLEs, but also your, you guessed it, technology. And so at the end of the presentation, I am going to drop the CLE code into the chat. I am also going to say it out loud, and don't worry, it will also be included in that email that you receive after the event. I always like to mention that email is going to come from Zoom, so it might go into your spam box or you might miss it. It's not going to come from my email directly, but what I will do is drop my email address into the chat. If you don't see it or you need anything else, please feel free to reach out. Third piece of housekeeping announcement is closed captions. Those have been enabled for anybody that does need that extra accessibility. So you should be able to pop those on. Again, if you have any issues, you can reach out to me directly via the messaging feature here on Zoom or my email. Fourth piece of housekeeping announcement, my favorite, is questions and answers. We're here with somebody who is willing to give you the knowledge that they have from doing it themselves. So don't be shy. Ask the questions that you have. This is an opportunity to be as engaged as a learning community as possible. I know that feels wonky sometimes when we're on Zoom, but please don't be shy. We're here to answer your questions. Q&A or chat, whatever works easiest for you. And if we have enough time at the end, I can usually take people off of mute to ask their questions verbally, depending on our time. So with that being said, I am so excited to introduce our speaker that those of you are familiar with if you came to our session 1 of Leaving a Legal Legacy. I'm sorry, let me back up. I have 2 people here with me. I have our speaker and I have Jorge Acosta Palmer. I'm so sorry, I got so excited. Jorge is here representing the Public Interest Law section of the Florida Bar, as I am a member as well. Quickly turning it over to you, Jorge, to just tell us a little bit more about the Public Interest Law section of the Florida Bar and mention anything that you wanted to about our Leaving a Legal Legacy training that we have here today.
All right, thanks, Alexis. So I'm Jorge Acosta Palmer. I am a staff attorney with Community Legal Services, and I've been a member of the Public Interest Law section, also known as PILS, for a few years now. And I've been a pretty active member. I started with the landlord-tenant subject work group, but eventually I became a member of the Executive Council, and I also joined the Professional Development Operating Committee, which is what led to this training, right? And working with Alexis. So I started thinking my experience in public interest law going back 8 years now, not having any experience at all, and knowing that we have a lot of part-time attorneys in our own law firm that have their own solo law firm. So started thinking about the challenges that we faced as newer attorneys and some of the challenges that we face as public interest attorneys with limited resources. And technology is a big part of it. Whether you're a new attorney or you're working for a public interest law firm, technology can give you that leverage and that advantage that you don't necessarily have. So there's a lot to learn about technology. Sometimes, you know, I joke around with I'm not IT. I tell a lot of people that I'm not IT at my firm, but it's really important to learn all these concepts so you can understand different systems, different platforms, and if you have an IT department, you can properly communicate with them and speak the same language. It really goes a long way. So if you're not a member of PILS, I highly encourage you to look at the website. I'll drop the link here on the chat and consider joining. If you're a law student listening to this, you actually get a discount rate, which is pretty cool. So that's my pitch for today. Back to you, Alexis.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jorge. Now, to introduce our speaker here today, we have C. Todd Smith, who has been a lawyer since 1994 and is the founder of C. Todd Smith Law in Orlando, Florida. Todd specializes in plaintiffs' personal injury law, including wrongful death cases, motor vehicle accidents, and premises liability. Todd has served as the chair of the Orange County Bar Association Solo and Small Firm Committee and chair of the Technology Committee. Todd has given numerous presentations in the areas of time management, professional development, law office management, leadership, social media, and technology for lawyers. So like I said, folks, we've got the expert here. I'm going to turn it over to you, Todd. Thank you so, so much for teaching us today.
Alexis, thank you so much. That's such a nice introduction. And Jorge, thank you for your partnership on putting together this webinar series. Very excited to be here with all of you today. So as Alexis mentioned, I've been a lawyer for a long time. Later this year is going to be my 30th anniversary of practicing law. And most of that time, I've been a solo or small firm attorney. I started out at the public defender's office, and after 4 years, left and opened up my own law firm with another public defender buddy of mine. And then over the years, have primarily been a solo attorney. So I think a lot of you out there probably, we have a lot in common. And so I'm excited to share with you some of my thoughts today about technology, whether you're already in your solo practice and you're maybe newer to the practice, or whether you're thinking about maybe someday starting your own law firm. Some of these technology considerations we're going to talk about today hopefully will be very helpful to you. As Alexis mentioned, I'm in Orlando. I practice plaintiffs' personal injury law. So I'm a solo attorney, and I have used technology. And the reason why I'm such an advocate for technology, especially for solo and small firm attorneys, is that technology can make you more efficient and help you compete against larger firms. And that efficiency that technology gives you also makes your life better. And I'm a big proponent of finding hacks and different ways to make our lives as attorneys better and easier. I think a lot of times the complaints we hear about practicing law is just because we're practicing the wrong way. So if we use technology in a way to make our life easier, I think it makes the practice of law so much better. So let me get my screen here up for you and kind of go over a couple things I want to talk about today. If you have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat. If I don't see them, I'll try to make sure we come back to any questions at the end. But why am I excited about technology? Well, I've always been kind of a tech nerd. I love technology. I love all this stuff. But to give you some background, and here comes the story of when I used to walk to school in the snow when I was a kid. When I went to law school, I did not have a computer. Most of my time in law school was without a computer. That was in the early 90s. And even in those days, we did not use online research. We still used, remember those things called paper books or books made of paper? That's what we used for our legal research when I went to law school. So when I started seeing, how rapidly things were changing because of technology, I wanted to get in front of all those changes and be one of those attorneys that wasn't learning about something a year or two after it came out, but I was one of the attorneys that was telling other people about it before it came out. So I'm really, really into technology, and I'm so glad you're here today and we can talk about it. So a lot of you on the call, when you became a lawyer, this was the primary mode of communication. I know these are kind of clip art images, but they look like the real thing. I miss the BlackBerry, love the BlackBerry and the flip up phone with the type, with all the full keyboard. I love that. I miss those. But for some of us, this was the primary mode of communication when they became a lawyer. The first mobile phone, which is hilarious. It only weighed like 10 pounds. So for some of us, and I think this includes me and my generation, this was the primary mode of communication when I became a lawyer. And this next one, it's not a spaceship. This is called a phone booth. And yes, people used to actually open a door, step into this booth, put money in a slot, and make a telephone call. For those of you that are younger members, or excuse me, are younger attendees on the call, if you've never had the experience of going in a phone booth, it's actually kind of fun. You should seek one out. There's a few in the world left somewhere, I'm sure. And then for some of our members, and these are the ones that are really hard to kind of get them on board with technology, this was the primary mode of communication when they became a lawyer. And then for those even going back further, this is how we used to communicate. 10 cans in a string. It actually sort of works. But my point is to show you how communication has changed so much, in particular, over the last 30 years since I've been practicing law. So in order to be good at your job as a lawyer and to be more efficient in your small firm or solo practice, you've got to keep up with all these developing trends. And there's a big one on the way. And we're going to talk about it a little bit in this webinar as well, called artificial intelligence, or AI. And AI is going to change everything. And I think the changes that AI are going to bring about are going to be even more revolutionary and even more accelerated than what we've seen with the internet and mobile phones. But here's the beauty of where we are currently with our technology that's available to us as lawyers, is that your entire practice is in the palm of your hand. Every single contact you have in the world, you can have their information in here. Every single one of your cases, you can have that case information in here, your case documents, your calendar, everything that you need to practice law is right here. And so for a lot of our practices, you could actually be anywhere in the world. And if you have one of these and you've got the right technology, you could practice law from anywhere. So that's what the power of this technology, if you use it, is going to do for you. Let's real quick talk about some of the ethics of technology, which has been developing a lot over the last several years. But I want to first cite to ABA Model Rule 1.1, to maintain the requisite knowledge and skill, a lawyer should keep abreast of changes in the law and its practice, including the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. Engage in continuing study and education, and comply with all continuing legal education requirements to which the lawyer is subject. I want to underline for you, which I appreciate you all being here today, because one of our ethical obligations is to engage in continuing study and education. So you can't be satisfied with just what you know about technology right now. You've got to always be learning and engage in continuing to learn more about all these new tools that are coming out, especially AI. Okay, Florida bar requirements. The Florida Supreme Court has said to maintain the requisite knowledge and skill, a lawyer should keep abreast of changes in the law and its practice, engage in continuing study and education, including an understanding of the benefits and risks associated with the use of technology, and comply with all continuing legal education requirements. So basically mirrors the ABA model rule. And in 2017, the Florida bar, which was the first state in the nation to do this, now requires that you get 3 hours of mandatory technology CLE, which is another benefit of you being here today, that we're giving you some tech CLE as a result of it. So for those of you that are thinking about starting your firm, let's just start with the very basics. You know, recall this series, Leaving a Legacy. And to have a legacy, you first got to build a strong foundation. So a lot of what we're going to talk today about is how to have a strong foundation in your technology that will help you in your legal practice. So the basics of getting started, of course, you got to have a laptop or a computer, Windows or Mac. You need to make that decision. I know we're not going to talk politics today, so I'm not going to compare Windows to Mac because that is a touchy subject for a lot of people. I happen to be a Windows guy. Mac people, don't hold that against me. But you do need to decide what ecosystem you want to operate your firm in, Windows or Mac. Internet connection, pretty basic. I would recommend get as fast of an internet connection as you can afford. And also make sure it's secure. And then you need a dedicated phone number. So that's voice over internet, or you can use a cell phone or cellular service. Although these days there are so many apps available that you can use voice over internet. That's probably the most easy thing to do, is to go with an app and a dedicated phone number. You got to have your own domain name. Listen, from day one, you need to be marketing, and never, ever, ever, ever stop marketing. So to be ready for that marketing, you got to have your own domain name ready to go so people know how to find you. I think everybody has to have a scanner. Now, these days, this is a pretty good scanner. I've got a scanning app that I use that is actually just as good as the scanner sitting here on my desktop, although it's a little more cumbersome to, scan using a cell phone, but you could get away with that if you had to. And then a practice management system or a billing system, some way that you're going to send out invoices, and a case management system. Now, this doesn't necessarily especially when you're starting out your practice, doesn't have to be a paid case management solution. It could be as simple as a notepad or an Excel spreadsheet, or keeping your files on OneDrive. Whatever your system is, you could create a system that's low cost or potentially free, although I don't recommend that. So you don't necessarily have to go out and subscribe to a case management system from day one. And then, of course, you got to have some kind of access to legal research. I believe we still have law libraries that are a physical library you can go to. I visited one a few years ago, but of course, I tend to do all my legal research online. There are some free options for legal research with like Fastcase, for example, through the Florida Bar. But there's, Westlaw, Nexus, whichever one you want to look at. But you got to have some kind of availability of legal research to get started. This is kind of a caveat I want to give you on technology, which is sometimes there's free stuff and sometimes you just have to pay. And that's a lesson I've learned over the years. I've tried a lot of free or lower cost alternatives to some of the kind of standard big players in the tech world that we all use in our practices. And for me personally, I typically find that the stuff I pay for, I get a better product. And some of the free stuff or the lower cost stuff will work, but it doesn't work the way I want it to. And that causes me to lose efficiency. And again, the reason we want to be focused on what kind of tech we're using is we want to be more efficient so that we can get more work done in less time and have more satisfaction and have a happier life. So sometimes you just got to pay for some of this stuff. So for example, you got to figure out which ecosystem, again, you're going to work in. Are you going to use Office and use Microsoft Word, or are you going to use Google G Suite, Google Docs? Which format do you want to use? There's some different things you got to consider with each of these options. So first and foremost, anytime you're starting your law firm, I would always counsel you and advise you to be very careful about your overhead, to keep your overhead as low as possible, certainly the first couple of years that you're starting your practice. So some of what may be available to you depends on your budget and how much you're willing to spend. Absolutely, and this goes back to our Florida Bar ethical requirements, is security. You have to maintain confidentiality of your client information, and so security should be one of your number one concerns when you're selecting what type of product you're going to use. Let me give you an example. I've seen attorneys that just use the free version of Gmail. That is not secure. Have you ever noticed in some of your emails, if you're using Gmail, you might get a sponsored ad or something related to something that's in the email? That's because Google's scanning all of your email. And so you want to be careful about using the free versions of anything. Remember this goes back again to the sometimes you just got to pay for stuff and sometimes free is okay, but nothing is actually free, right? Social media is not free. You don't have to pay to use Facebook, for example, but Facebook is using your data and your information to be attractive to advertisers who want to sell to you. So your information that you're giving Facebook is the price you pay to use Facebook. With all of these technology products that are out there on the web today, it's the exact same thing. Nothing is actually free. So you have to ask yourself, if it is a free service, what is it that they're getting out of this? So that's one way to kind of do that cost, benefit, and risk analysis of the technology products you're using. Ease of use. I'll tell you what happened to me. This is a great example. As a tech guy, I wanted to be a Mac guy. Sorry, we're going to go back to the Mac Windows conversation, even though I said we wouldn't. I thought Mac was cool. Let me try to use a Mac. My wife had a Mac. Let me break out the Mac. I'm going to be a Mac lawyer. I was on all these Mac lawyer websites. I hated using the Mac. It just didn't work for me because for me, I'd always been a Windows guy. So for me, I stuck with Windows, and I'm a PC guy, not a Mac guy. Integration with other tools. This is really, really important with like your document management, maybe even some of the tools you use for case management. A lot of the case management providers have plugins or extensions that work with their product. For example, one case management may sync with OneDrive. One case management system may sync with Dropbox. Maybe they sync with both of them. So you have to kind of figure out what are all the puzzle pieces of the technology you want to use and what's the best way to make them all fit together. Another lesson I will kind of give you after doing this for a long time, especially when you start making a little more money and you can afford to have more subscriptions to more products, then you have to be careful that you've got all of these different software products and you're paying a monthly subscription for all of them, but you have a lot of duplication of what they could do. And then you're wasting money. So you want to be as efficient as you can with which technology products you're using. So you're not just wasting some of the functionality of this tool over here because you prefer the way this tool over here works better. Try to match up again, take all the puzzle pieces and try to match them up as best as you can. I'm a big fan. And listen, I'm going to endorse several products and tools that I use today, but I'm not getting paid anything to advertise for these products. But I'm just telling you from my experience, I love the Fujitsu ScanSnap. For me, that is the only scanner I will probably ever buy. I've had 3 or 4 of them over the last 15 years. They last a long time. They're really fast and they do really well. I'm also an Adobe Acrobat person. Now, Adobe is a little pricier than some of the other options that are out there for creating and working with PDF files. But for me, again, the functionality, the efficiency that I get from using Adobe Acrobat is worth what I pay for my monthly subscription. Now, I want to talk about in any technology conversation, we have to talk about when the technology fails. And over the years, the internet has gotten much better. We don't, used to be when you first had internet, sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't work. Now we don't really have that as a concern. Most of us have pretty consistent 24-hour-a-day internet. But you always have to plan for what happens if you don't. What happens if you have an internet outage? What happens if something happens to you, lose your laptop? I hope that never ever happens to anybody. That's a bad feeling. But what happens if you did lose your laptop that had all of your client information on it? So you got to plan for a crash, plan for the worst case scenario. Think through some of those worst case scenarios. So what if you were riding on the Lynx bus downtown Orlando and you just accidentally left your laptop sitting on the bus when you jumped off to grab a cup of coffee? What would you do in the first minute that you realized your laptop was gone? Do you have a way to scrub remotely everything that's on your laptop? Same thing for your phone. If you have client information on your phone, do you know how to remotely scrub the data on your phone or lock someone out of your phone if you happen to lose it? So think through those worst case scenarios. It's not fun and it's a scary feeling, but it'll save you a lot of trouble later. It's kind of like having a backup plan for a natural disaster. Do you know what you would do if the worst thing happened? It helps to do some pre-planning on this. So if you do get in one of these situations, you've got a quick backup plan. You're ready to go. You know what you're going to do. Now, as far as backing up your data, in particular client data, you'd never want to lose your client data. And I think this conversation has changed over the years. Remember, we used to, many years ago, and maybe some firms still do this, they have paper files in a file cabinet. I have a file cabinet back here, and now it's where I put junk. I don't have any files in there. It's where I just throw stuff. But firms may still have a file cabinet and paper files. What happens if you have digital files and they're somewhere on your laptop or maybe they're on the cloud? Do you know how to access them if something happened to your computer, for example? Another option that we don't see as much these days, especially solo and small firms, are having a dedicated server. Years ago, every law firm, even small law firms, and even I knew some solos that they said, well, you got to have a server. We wouldn't put our documents and our data on the cloud because for a while that was really scary to a lot of attorneys until we knew that the cloud was secure. So if you're going to have data on a server, then you've got to have redundancies and backup systems for that. But let me talk real quick about, for example, online data storage. Make sure you're using a reputable vendor. Again, there's a cost versus quality factor you've got to weigh out, and also legal versus non-legal. That's pretty important in technology as well, because why? Because with legal vendors, they're aware of your ethical requirements and the requirements in particular of confidentiality of client data. So they know in order to keep you as a customer of their service, they've got to maintain some type of standards that are going to comply with the bar rules. Whereas non-legal vendors, they don't care that you're an attorney. They don't care that you have ethical obligations. So when you're dealing with a non-legal vendor, it requires a little more homework to make sure that your client data is protected. But some questions you want to ask, and this also, asking and answering these questions will satisfy your ethical obligation that I read to you earlier, and we're going to talk more about it in a few minutes. So what standard does the vendor follow, and do they have a history of any security breaches? So if you use Dropbox, well, go research in Google. How many times has Dropbox had any kind of security breach? How often is the data backed up? And where is your data located? Is there geographic redundancy, meaning they store the same data in more than one location? So if something happened and their server farm blew up one day, do they have your data backed up somewhere else? And then also think about it, especially for client data, what country are their servers located where your data is stored? Because different countries are obviously going to have different legal requirements about what they might turn over to a third party who may send a subpoena to get copies of records for whatever reason. And then read the terms of service. Again, this will satisfy your ethical obligation in this area is if you read the terms of service and answer some of these questions. So you want to pay close attention to data ownership, confidentiality, sharing with third parties, and data destruction policies. Those are all things you want to be as familiar with as you can. I know all of us, when you download a new app, you just click accept the terms, right? I'm sure all of you attorneys on there read through every license agreement and every terms of service when you click I accept this app on my phone. So make sure you're looking at least for these key areas. Security vulnerabilities to avoid. Some of these, I get really nervous in my office, and I've done a lot of training with staff to make sure they don't get tricked. Man, these phishing scams, especially with AI, because AI now is helping them write in proper grammar and proper English, because a lot of the scams before, they were written so badly, you knew it wasn't legitimate. Well, now they're getting pretty good. As lawyers, they're targeting us as well, because they can send you something that says you have an important document waiting from so-and-so law firm, and you think that might be a legitimate document from that law firm, and it's totally a bogus link that's just trying to trick you into clicking that link. I had one about a year ago that was seemingly from a potential client, and it looked like a PDF file, and she asked me to review her crash report for her auto accident case. And there was just something weird about it, so I didn't click it, but I had to run to my assistant's desk almost immediately and say, hey, I know that looks legit. Don't click on that PDF link. And then we did a little more investigation. It was a phishing scam. They just wanted us to click that document, and that was a link to something we did not want to click. So be careful, and you got to train staff, and you got to train yourself also. Don't just instinctively click on a link or get duped into doing something you don't want to do from an email. Failing to use multi-factor or two-factor authentication. I know some of us get annoyed that I already using a password. Now I got to wait for you to text me my code to my cell phone. That two-factor authentication is going to be much, much safer, especially with any of your tools that you're using that have to do with client information. So make sure you and your staff, if you have staff, make sure they are all using two-factor authentication or the multi-factor authentication for logging on to those sites. And then be careful with your passwords. You've heard this before, weak passwords, don't reuse the same password in multiple locations. And I've actually had this in my office before where somebody was just writing down all their passwords and kept it right next to their computer. that doesn't do a lot of good as a password if somebody were to be in your office and say, oh, here's a whole page of this person's passwords to every site they use. So some of that stuff is pretty basic, but you got to be careful about it. And then allowing staff, if you have staff, to use personal devices for work. We've kind of gotten very, carefree with everybody using their cell phones to do work on. But if it's not a device that you issued them and it's a personal device, you got to have some protocols and some rules about that. Case management software. So now I want to talk about if you're going to select case management software, how do you do that? It can be really tricky because we know there's lots of options. And generally, what I suggest to you is write down each thing that you want case management to do for you. So is it time tracking? Is it the calendar? Is it contact management? Is it managing your files? Is it managing your cases or case management? For me in a personal injury practice, I use a product called CaseBeer because it has a tool for managing medical records. And not many other case management tools specifically had built in managing medical records into their product. So write down what are all of the things you want your case management system to do. Then rank from 1 to whatever the lowest number is. What's the most important thing you want it to do? And then kind of look at and create a matrix of what it is you're looking for in a case management system. And here's why. And this is from somebody who's demoed a lot of case management systems. I think I've used 3 or 4 over the last 15 years or so, maybe longer. And so I've gone through this myself. And I promise you, if you get the wrong case management software, it is a pain in the neck to then migrate all of that data to another system if you made the wrong choice. So make sure you always do a demo of any product you're considering, but keep in mind the demo is never going to work the same way as it will in your day-to-day practice when you're actually going through files and trying to figure out stuff that you want it to do. But once you know what are the most important criteria to you in case management, then do the demo and then see if that case management meets the needs or the requirements that you have based on your own priorities. That's a great way to figure it out because we know you've got a lot of different options. So all of these here that are on the screen, I've used several of these in the past, and I can tell you that's another factor to consider is when you're looking at a new case management product, how easy is it and how much support do they offer to help you migrate your data from one case management product to another case management product? Because that onboarding of new case management is a very, very challenging and difficult project. But you can get through it, but you need to ask some questions and do a lot of research ahead of time. On the Clio website, they had a good article a while back on 10 things to consider before choosing case management software, and I just want to run through those with you. So cloud-based versus server-based, I think server-based is kind of going away, but that is still a thing. Some firms use servers. Ease of use. This is where the demo is going to help you. What's going to be the easiest software to use and learn? Some people really like techie stuff like me. I like to figure out software. I like to figure out how stuff works. Other people are just like, hey, I just want to plug it in and it just works. So different case management is going to work differently. So some are maybe easier to use as a beginner and others take a little more training and work to learn how to use them. Mobile access. Do you want to have, for example, an app that the case management tool has an app that you can access your information via the app? Do you want the client to have access via an app? And all case management products that I've seen all do this in a little bit of different ways. And some don't have client access at all. So is that something important to you? If you have a practice where you're dealing with clients a lot, I would say, for example, criminal law or personal injury or maybe family law, you want them to be able to access their documents, see things happening in their case. So maybe a client side app is a pretty important feature to you. Integrations. I mentioned this. All of the case management has different integrations that integrate, for example, with Constant Contact or MailChimp for marketing. Maybe they integrate with Word or Google Docs. So you want to look and see what integrations they offer to try to get those puzzle pieces I talked about, to get as many of those puzzle pieces to fit together as you can, instead of having all these different products all spread out all over the place. Then read the reviews. Obviously, there's a lot of great websites that do reviews on case management. I also recommend talking to as many attorneys as you can that have used that product, because you might get one attorney that loves it. And again, that's because, like I said, all those different criteria, maybe some attorneys are really, they're big on hourly billing. So they love how their product does hourly billing and invoices. But maybe you're more concerned with the calendar and scheduling and having your team be able to calendar things for you. And maybe the calendar on that same program or case management system just doesn't work that well. So ask a bunch of different attorneys you know for their experience with that case management tool. And then, of course, cost is always a factor. Adding and removing users, how easy is it to add people to use the product? And then that transition or migrating from one product to the other. And then what kind of support do they offer? Is it free support? Is it live support? Is it just an online knowledge base? Do they offer any free training or support when you sign up to use their service? Think about all those things going into it. And then, of course, you got to look at their security. If it's a legal-based case management tool, they're going to most likely have security protocols built in. And here's why that's important. So Florida Bar Ethics Opinion 12.3, this is from over 10 years ago. This was an advisory opinion that said lawyers may use cloud computing if they take reasonable precautions to ensure that confidentiality of client information is maintained, that the service provider maintains adequate security, and that the lawyer has adequate access to the information stored remotely. The lawyer should research the service provider to be used. So that, again, is where, you know, if you're not that techie of a person, you may say to me, well, Todd, I have no idea how this cloud storage stuff works. I don't know if it's secure or not. I don't know if my client documents are going to actually be confidential or not. Well, your ethical obligation is to do the research on the service provider that you want to use. And that's your first step. Lawyers who use cloud computing, therefore, have an ethical obligation to understand the technology they are using and how it potentially impacts confidentiality of information relating to client matters, so that the lawyers may take appropriate steps to comply with their ethical obligations. So again, this research and knowing what the products are is really, really important. So listen, while I'm going to go through a few of my favorite tech tools, I want you to be thinking about some of your favorite tech tools, and maybe at the end of the presentation, just pop them into the chat for me, because I would love to see what you're using, and everyone else on the call, I'm sure, would appreciate any recommendations for your favorite tech tools. So these are just a couple using right now that I'm really excited about, including AI, which created this great graphic for me in about 30 seconds or less. When I said I'm doing a presentation on technology tools for lawyers, please create a graphic for me. And so, boom, here's a graphic. So that's number one. I mean, folks, AI is going to change everything. I had drinks with an attorney recently. We were talking about AI, and he said, I don't want to even deal with that. I don't even want to talk about AI. I'm like, you better learn to talk about AI, because it's coming, and it's not stopping, and it's not going to slow down, and it's going to be here and prevalent before you know it. So you might as well get ahead of it and start learning how to use it in your practice. So there are a lot of AI tools. I'm not going to go into all the other alternatives today. But Google has a product, Microsoft has a product that's called Copilot that they're building into Office, their Office apps. Gemini is one. I guess that might be Google. I'm not sure. But I've been using OpenAI kind of from the beginning. There's a free version, and then there's a paid version that's $19.99 a month. Like I said, free versus paying. You get a little bit more when you pay. So there's some more functionality that I get from my paid subscription, but you can do a lot with the free version of ChatGPT. And I've done a whole AI presentation before. If that's something you're interested in, contact me, email me, and I'll be happy to send you my AI presentation. We did one for the Orange County Bar Association. We did a 3-hour webinar on AI back in October. But let me just show you a couple of examples for those of you that aren't familiar with AI and ChatGPT, for example, and I'll show you what it can do. So this is a prompt I put in that you are a paralegal working on a case where our client was beat up by another guest at the wedding who consumed excessive amounts of alcohol. We don't know if the venue was owned by a business entity or just by an individual acting as a sole proprietor in her individual capacity. Draft interrogatory questions for us to send to the defendant on these issues. And literally in 5 seconds, it spit up what I thought were pretty good questions. I think it generated about 30 questions. I could have asked it to generate 100 questions, but it generated pretty good questions specifically on the topic that I was asking it about. So years ago, I would have to either go to my form bank and dig through all my old sample interrogatory questions, or I'd have to log on to Westlaw and go to one of the Westlaw sample discovery handbooks to pull up sample questions in this type of a case. Here, with just one paragraph of a prompt, I had really good interrogatories in literally 5-10 seconds. So if you're not using AI, you got to start using it and figuring out how it can help you in your practice. Here's another example. So I basically, and I call ChatGPT, I got this term from a colleague of mine. I call it chatty because it can be a little chatty, but I think they're kind of getting better at it being a little less verbose. But I asked Chatty to help me as my paralegal. So I say, I'm going to give you some case law to review in the area of exculpatory causes and liability waivers. I'll also provide the Florida statute. Then I will provide you with a sample liability waiver to review. I'd like you to act like a paralegal and review the background information and then apply it to your interpretation of the sample waiver. Any questions I need to answer or additional information you need? Question mark. And then ChatGPT says, great, you provided the case law documents mentioned in the Florida statute. In preparation, I'll be examining the provided case law to understand the legal precedents regarding exculpatory clauses and liability waivers in Florida. So this session I did in about, this was kind of a deep session. I went about an hour on this, back and forth, asked questions. I had it review the sample liability waiver that I had in my case that I was examining. I had it review the case law, and then I asked it to write a memo based on what we discussed in the conversation. Basically, Chatty is my paralegal. Be careful. This is the warnings that we have to give as a caveat, though, of course, with AI. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen the story. It was in the New York Times and all over the internet about the attorneys. I think they were in New York, and they turned in a brief, and the opposing counsel are reading the brief, and they're like, these cases are right on point with their argument, but I practice in this specific area, and these cases, I've never heard of these cases. So, of course, they look up the cases. The cases are completely bogus, made up cases. So AI is not quite there on getting legal citations correct. So do not ask it for legal precedent or for citations or for case law. It will get that stuff wrong. As you notice the way I used it, and you have to have the paid version to be able to upload documents for it to review. But I uploaded the case law that I wanted it to review and gave it just those limited cases to review and pull the information from just those cases. I didn't ask it to go out on the internet and do legal research for me. That's where you might get into trouble. So always check the source if the citation is important. Don't rely on AI to get the answer right, or assume that the source is correct or that it even exists, especially for case law or for statutes. I find that it's a little better on statutes, but it's definitely a problem on case law. But I think that's going to change as it gets better. But note at the bottom, under send a message where you'd enter your prompt, it says ChatGPT can make mistakes. Consider checking important information. So that's my AI warning. So here's a couple tips that I want to leave you with to use AI more and get more familiar with it if you're not already doing this. I downloaded the ChatGPT app on my phone, and I've been doing a lot of brainstorming with it. So I'll just have it in my car as I'm driving, and I'll hit the button to do a prompt, and it's a verbal conversation. And so I'll just start asking AI questions, and it will verbally respond with the app. That may require the paid subscription. I'm not sure. But familiarize yourself with the different options. They're changing every day. This space is rapidly developing. There are legal vendors in this space as well, and they're going to be more suited to your needs. Again, be careful with confidentiality. I would not put any client information that identifies a client or confidential information. I wouldn't put any of that into any AI product unless you've done your due diligence, like we showed in the other slide, and you know about confidentiality and what confidentiality they're offering with their product. This was a tip I got from someone else that really made a big difference for me, was just to keep ChatGPT open in my browser. So I have all the tabs open in my browser that I'm working on, but I always have a ChatGPT tab open. And anytime I have to write something that's going to take me more than 30 seconds, I put it in ChatGPT and I let ChatGPT write it. It's going to do so without grammatical errors. It's not going to spell anything wrong. It's usually going to be pretty good on the content, and it's going to save me a lot of time. So even if I could write something in 1 or 2 minutes, I'm going to have ChatGPT do it because I've got less chance of there being an error, and usually it's going to be right on point with what I want it to say. Attend webinars. You're here today, so that's great. But attend webinars, follow any blogs. There's a lot of social media accounts. For example, on Instagram, there's a lot of AI Instagram accounts, and I learned a lot of stuff just through following those Instagram accounts that are focused on AI. Pay attention, though. There's a lot of legal AI products that are on the way. Things are changing fast. And in the legal space, they're not going to give away those products for free. They're going to cost us money to use those products. So be careful. I think there's going to be some products that you might see that you could actually do something this might be where for right now, some of the free stuff may be just as good as some of the paid products, depending on what you're looking for. I want to run through real quick, and we're getting here near the end, and I still want to have some time for questions and show you some other examples of some of my favorite tech products that I get excited about using here in my firm. This is what you could do with AI. This is a lot of different ways I've been using it, but brainstorming. So what are 10 steps to create a marketing plan for a small personal injury firm? Help me identify a target audience for my personal injury firm. And then if you get even more data, here's my typical client. They're this age, they're this demographic, they've had this type of accident, they live in this part of town. Give it more information, and then it will give you better responses. These are just kind of examples that are just kind of real short, brief examples for purposes of the presentation today. But the more information and detail you put in the prompt, the better the response is going to be. Here's another one I did that was kind of a fun conversation. How can I advertise my personal injury law firm other than TV and billboards? Follow-up prompt, prepare an outline for a presentation you described above. How can I get more client reviews? Write a personalized request for review from a recent client. Write 10 social media posts. You could actually say write 100 social media posts if you wanted to, but write 10 social media posts about the need to have uninsured motorist coverage on your auto insurance in Florida. Please provide 20 ideas for short form video content for Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. Provide examples of a hook to engage the viewer in the first few seconds or to keep them from immediately scrolling to the next video. I find AI with the marketing stuff is really, really good, valuable information, and has helped me a lot in my marketing. Okay, now here's some other tech tools. These are just software products online that I love, some free, some not. This is Trello. If you're not familiar with Trello, somebody showed me this a few years ago, and it's been huge for me. I use Trello all the time. This is called a board, and it's similar to, think of, it's an electronic Kanban board. So a Kanban board, kind of think of the engineering space where you have a big whiteboard and a bunch of sticky notes on the board in columns. And then you move those sticky notes from column to column as the project progresses. So that's how this works. All of these cards in each column can be moved around and dragged from one column to the next. So it's kind of that same Kanban board type setup. But this is an onboarding plan I did for a staff member that we were training, and I wanted to have an onboarding plan of day one, we review this. This is what we're going to cover in week one. Here's week two. Here's week three, that kind of thing. So we share this board with that new employee, and she's able to go through and basically go through each of these little training modules on her own. And it was a good way for us to remember and keep up with an outline of what we want to work on. Here's another example. This is like a shot of my marketing plan that I have on Trello. So I have different columns with different types of marketing that I'm doing. So referrals from attorneys, referrals from former clients. And I keep a lot of my kind of my marketing plan is just here on Trello. This is free. Trello is free up to a certain number of boards. If you get really addicted to it and you got a bunch of boards, you're going to have to get the paid version. But you can do a whole lot with the free version. HubSpot, I'm a big proponent of everyone. When you start your firm, every single contact you have needs to go somewhere in a contact management system. So if not a spreadsheet, it needs to go into a CRM or a contact relationship manager. HubSpot is a free contact manager that I've been using for my law firm for the last few years. I love it. It works great. It's got a lot of functionality that I don't use. So a lot of it is more complicated than I need it to be. But for just the basic stuff I'm doing with my contact management and some of my marketing stuff, I use HubSpot. There's a lot of other alternatives. Keep that in mind, folks. The products I'm showing you today are just the ones that I'm using and I like, but every one of these products has probably 20 competitors that are very similar and do similar things. I mentioned before, and this is kind of, I guess, a reoccurring theme today, paid versus free. When something's free, you got to ask, well, why is it free? Because nothing's really free. I'm paying for something. There are freemium models in a lot of these software products where they're going to give you the base package for free to get you using the product. And then when you start using it and you like it, then you got to subscribe to the paid subscription to get more of the functionality that you want. So the free version doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It just means they want you to kind of get used to the product so that hopefully you'll subscribe to the paid version because you need more of the tools that they sort of hold back on you until you get the paid version. Zapier, if you like automation, and this is for my real techie brothers and sisters out there, if you like tech and you want to figure out how to automate stuff in your practice, Zapier is awesome. They call them Zap. So it's similar to, there was an app called If This Then That, and you connected different apps to do things. So for example, if you had a Google spreadsheet and you put an attorney's name in there in the Google spreadsheet, it might then create an automatic email in Outlook that sends a introduction email to that person. So you can automate some cool things with Zapier. So that's a fun tool that I like. This one is a paid product. This one is not free. Case Status is a product I use to send text messages to clients, but it also is a client-facing app, which kind of like the Domino's pizza tracker shows the client where their case is, what status their case is in. And also they can upload documents that way. They can log in medical appointments. They can send us text messages. They can give us reviews. They can share our contact information with other people. There's a lot of cool things that it does. It also asks the clients for a net promoter score, if you're familiar with that, an NPS score. So about every 30 to 60 days, they get asked, how likely are you to recommend C. Todd Smith Law on a scale of 1 to 10? So every 30, 60 days, I get a notification of our NPS score from specific clients. It's a really cool tool. I love it a lot. Hi, hello. This is another one I like because it's free. Free stuff is cool. So this is a electronic business card that I use, and it also is a email signature that I use. They'll give you a little bit of their functionality for free. There's a few other things it'll do, like, for example, the analytics. If you want to pay, you could pay and then have the analytics turned on so you can see how many times someone clicked your QR code or how many times you shared your business card with somebody, that type of thing. And then this is not a product. This is a resource for you all to keep in mind that I want you to bookmark and use frequently. This is the Florida Bar's Legal Fuel Knowledge Center, and they have a whole section on technology that's great. Lots of great resources there for you to learn about technology, especially when you're starting out your law firm. Last thing I want to leave you with is, as I said, also, I think it was in one of the ethical slides that we had earlier about continuing to learn and engage in this process of continuing to learn about technology. And that is to stay curious and keep learning, especially in the area of AI, which is going to change all of our practices. It's going to change the world. But we as attorneys, I think, need to get in front of that. And one way we can do that is by staying curious, wanting to learn new stuff, wanting to learn how all this technology works and how it can make our life better. So I love talking about technology. This is my contact information. Todd@ctoddlaw.com is my email. I'm on social media, of course. If you click this QR code, that's my electronic business card with hi, hello. And I'm happy to continue the conversation offline with you. If you're in Orlando, you want to get lunch, or anywhere else in the state, and you want us to meet up for lunch sometime, let me know, or we can jump on Zoom. I'm happy to talk about technology, practice development, law office management, anything else you're interested in.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. My God, you're just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to these things. And the coolest thing about your knowledge is it's so practical and you make it so relatable. And honestly, while I'm listening to you, I think I can do this. I can do anything. So thank you very much for this. Turning it over quickly while folks are maybe thinking about any questions that they might have in the chat. Again, drop your questions in the chat or the Q&A, or I think we have a few minutes. So if you have a question you'd rather pose verbally, just raise your hand and I'll take you off of mute. Always gets fun when we get to do that. Jorge, did you have any questions or thoughts? I know you're always stewing on things like this and always have valuable things to say.
Oh yeah, it was actually, I have a few notes. It's actually comments and questions. By the way, you were mentioning the open AI, and I went in and there was a document that I've been thinking about, like a rent dispute letter, and I asked it to draft me a rent dispute letter, and it actually came out with a really great document that I will use. I obviously need to tweak it, but
right.
I'm amazed because it actually gave me a great letter in less than a second. It was like there, and like wow, it was like amazing. That. So. And you mentioned being ready for a plan for a crash, and I just happened. Something happened to me about a few months ago. I was with a client who was not tech savvy. We were attending a mediation, and we were attending it virtually. And I told her, "You're not tech savvy. Come with me to the office. I've got you." And the power went out in the middle of mediation. So obviously the Wi-Fi went out, and luckily for me, I had the hotspot. So I always have a hotspot with me. Sometimes I forget to charge it. So then I use my phone as my other backup hotspot. But in that scenario, I was ready for it. So I really thought about that scenario of the plan for a crash, right? And one thing that we face here at Legal Aid, a lot of our low-income clients don't necessarily have access to technology. Whether it is, a lot of them are dealing with their phones. So we're just sending them documents or we're asking them to sign something electronically, and they don't necessarily will be able to access it on their phone. But I had a story where a few years ago, we were dealing with rental assistance programs, and we needed the clients to quickly scan a lease or something. And the best part, I had clients that I was telling them, look, you're going to be eligible for $15,000. Yet they were happier to learn about how to scan the document with the Notes app on their iPhone. And it was so easy to show them. So technology goes a long way, both from the attorney perspective, but also helping out clients. And I was wondering if you could share maybe some tips on the client-facing part, because you may have some techie clients that know how to handle all these things, but how do you deal with clients that are not necessarily comfortable with technology?
That's such a great question, Jorge. And I love that when I have a client who's not a techie person, but they're using my case status app to communicate with us and send us documents. And they're like, oh, this is so easy. I didn't know it would be this easy. It's a lot about education and onboarding new clients with whatever tech tool you want them to use. So whether that's creating your own little short like video tutorial, or either having them in person in your office or sitting down with them and really just get their phone, show them how to download the app, show them how to use whatever it is, the tool you want to help them use. You may have to educate them and help them figure it out. But if they have the technology available, anybody can learn how to use this stuff these days, because all the tech companies want it to be accessible and want more people to use these products. So it just takes a little bit of maybe time and effort. But I think training videos are good. Anything you can do in writing, like a how-to with very specific instructions or screenshots, you got to do education with those clients that aren't tech savvy.
So, something I also wanted to add to this, and I don't think that you mentioned it. You might have popped it up when you were going through the AIs that you like, but there's a really cool AI too called Gamma. Have you heard of Gamma?
I haven't.
Gamma's really cool. It is actually a presentation builder.
Okay.
And it's wild. You have to have a more like premium account to get a larger
Right.
presentation, but it in seconds can create a PowerPoint for you, at least 5 to 10 slides that you can manipulate and change and download into PowerPoint and change however you want. So if you need like that baseline and then you want to
Yeah.
build from there, it's fantastic. So I know you had mentioned to also drop in the chat some AIs that you like, and I wanted to
For
share.
sure. That's a good one. I've been looking for a presentation tool. The other one I'm familiar with is Beautiful.ai. I think Beautiful.ai also does presentations. Again, we're going to get in the same thing with like the case management, right? You're going to have to look at different products and see how they do comparatively, and then what they cost, and then make a decision which one to use.
Yep, exactly. But it is the future, it is the present. So
Yeah.
well, anyway, folks, so Jorge, thank you for asking that question. And I don't see any more questions in the chat. And I know that we're after one. I do want to mention that the CLE code is 240452 7 N as in Nancy. Again, that's 240452 7 N as in Nancy. One general and one technology credit. If you didn't get to write that down, don't worry. You're going to get it along with the recording and an email from Zoom. My email, though, is in the chat. So you can always reach out to me directly if you do not see that hit your inbox, or if you need anything else. The last thing I want to say is I want to give a little shout out to our next presentation, which it pains me to say is the last one in our Leaving a Legal Legacy, but we're going to end on a bang. We have an amazing panel discussion for you all on these sort of real life considerations of folks who have moved from public interest to solo and small firm practice. And the panel is just stellar. I can't wait to share a platform with all of them. So I don't know, Todd, if you wanted to mention anything about that presentation.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm going to be facilitating that conversation. We have 3 lawyers that have built or are in the process of building their solo or small firm, and their various stages of their career. And it's going to be a great conversation on things they have learned through starting their own law firm, and hopefully offer some great advice for people.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So that's going to be on June 7th. I'm looking at my calendar here. You all who are registered here are also automatically registered for that next installment session, whatever we want to call it. But if you want to make sure, if you have any questions, you can always re-register. It'll be okay, or you can reach out to me, and I will make sure you get everything that you need. So with that being said, anything else, Jorge, Todd, before we sign off? Nope. This is my favorite. It's Friday.
Right.
Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much, Todd. It was really awesome, and it's a pleasure working with you. Looking forward to our next one.
Great. We'll see you next time.
Bye.